Hey guys, welcome to part 3 of my how to support series. So far we have covered roaming and warding, and this week we are doing positioning in the bot lane. We are going to be starting off with the parallel line / triangle theory, and then going into how to position as melee supports and range supports and play in the bushes. So I hope you guys enjoy. On top of that, if you didn't notice, we are not master anymore. We hit Grandmaster this week, and literally the same week we hit Grandmaster on our Smurf account. So I'm actually 2 accounts of masters. Huge pogs, but yeah, hope you guys enjoy. Alright, so we're going to be starting off with a big theory in League. You might have heard it as the parallel line theory or the triangle theory. I kind of like to just call them each part of it, but basically how this theory goes is that when you're in League in the bot lane, you want to try and stay parallel with your ADC in the line, in the lane, and there's a good reason for this. So this is the parallel line that I would need to keep in my ADC if he's like this, and this is the parallel line with the enemy, right? And the idea of the parallel line is if I'm in front of this line, I'm in risk of dying, right? And if I'm behind, whoopsies, and if I'm behind the line, now my ADC is at risk of dying, and this is why. So this is why it's called the parallel or triangle line. You want to try and maintain a parallel line with your ADC to keep him safe, and it's called the triangle theory for this reason. So say I move up to go for a combo like this. Well, as I go up for this combo, I'm actually creating this triangle where both the support and ADC can hit me, but my ADC has to walk up and make this line. He has to walk to here before he can go in on their ADC. So you can see the triangles are just different. So if you always imagine a triangle between you and the enemy and your ally and their enemy for who you want to go, you can see that their triangle is a lot smaller than our triangle. And the team with the smaller triangle is usually going to win. Because again, here, their ADC and support can both hit me, but my ADC has to walk up before he can get in range. And this ADC now has been doing damage to me for a full second before my ADC could join the fight, and we will probably lose because of the fact that their ADC had pressure first. So the idea is you always want to have the parallel line theory going. It's really important to keep this in your mind when you're playing. Just think that when you go for a poke, it doesn't mean you can't ever go up front. It just means if you're ahead of this line, you're in risk of getting ganged up on. And it means if you're behind this line, your ADC is at risk of getting ganged up on. Sometimes you have to be behind your ADC. Sometimes you have to be in front. For example, if I'm a Soraka and there's a Leona in this bush, I have to be back here. Because if the Leona goes in on me, I'm going to die. And it's better for a Leona to go on my ADC. But I still want to be maintaining as close possible for me to be able to walk up and maybe put a silence under their ADC. On the flip side, if I'm playing neeko, it's okay for me to stealth forwards and look for a root Q, but then run away. Now on the flip side, where this theory starts to really help is if you start paying attention, and if you notice when you stealth in at the same time, your ADC walks forwards and is now standing up here as you stealth in, right? So if I go for a root and I stealth forwards and my ADC walks up and I land the root Q, before if he didn't walk up, I was just going for the root Q and running away, right? But if I stealth forwards and my ADC walks up, I can now all in and just ignite and go all in and keep auto attacking, because my ADC moved up with me and maintained the parallel line. And same goes with the enemy. If you're standing here, right, and let's see, and say the enemy support walks up and he goes, say the enemy support goes, oh my god, the controls. Say the enemy support walks up to harass and goes here, right? Well, look what happens. If I root him, my ADC can hit with me. So this is basically the theory of the parallel line theory or / triangle theory. And again, very simple. It means you stay in parallel with your teammate. And if the enemy walks up, you can create a triangle where you guys can engage on them and they cannot fight back. Now I'll show you guys a quick clip from a game to show you this in action. Okay, so as we watch this clip real quick, I want you guys to watch and realize how we maintain the parallel line on both sides. So you can see parallel line. As my ADC walks forwards, I walk forward. My ADC walks back. We're walking together. As I'm walking forward, he's walking forwards. You can see we're always maintain this line, right? The parallel line, right? At all times, we are standing in parallel with each other. Because if I go in on this Alistar, then he's in range to go. But if he's behind me and I go in on this Alistar, then he has to walk forwards to hit. It's not something I'm thinking about when I'm playing, but it's something you should really get used to just making a habit, right? When I walked up, for instance, looking on the opposite side here, right? So watch when I walk up to throw this root and how dangerous it is because I break the parallel line and how badly it can go. See how my ADC, by the way, was under tower taking aggro? I walked forwards with him. Now watch. Watch this. Here, look how bad this is, okay? I'm going to throw a root, right? But look at the lines that are being drawn right here. So the parallel line is, if I want to be safe, I have to be here. Because their parallel line is basically right here. They're pretty much on top of each other. So at this point, both of them can right now, if Alistar went in on me because of her thing that lets her dash to the nearest target, they can both go in on me. But if I land my root on this guy, my Jhin cannot follow up, which means this trade I'm going for is a trade where only I can trade and my ADC cannot. Again, it doesn't mean you can't do stuff like this, but you have to know the risk. I will admit, when I was doing this, by the way, I had my finger, and I was on stream saying this out loud, that I had my finger on the flash button, and I was throwing the root so that if the Alistar, he has a play, he flashes my root and Qs me and then walks and knocks me under tower, I had my finger on the flash button ready to flash out because I was in a very, very, very vulnerable spot because I'm breaking parallel. It's hard to show examples of this, but I hope if you rewatch this over and over again, you'll just notice how every time me and my Jin's walking up, we're walking up together, backing off together, walking up together, backing off. And I hope this example, even though it doesn't get punished right here, I just hope it shows that like this angle where they're both in range to make this small triangle and go in. But then on the flip side, if Alistar like flashed over and knocked me under tower, Jin's range to follow up, this triangle is so much bigger, right? It's such a big triangle. So when you have this smaller triangle, you're in a worse position. Hope that helped. And now we're going to go into more detailed examples of lane. Okay, first we're going to be dealing with range supports, how to play the lane versus range supports and versus melee supports, and then we'll move on to melees after. So let's begin with me just quickly drawing out the minion wave. So we got the melees here and the casters, and on the enemy's team, we got the melees and the casters. Alrighty, so first of all, playing a range support. Usually, any support in general, you want to control the bush, but first of all, can we control the bush? What does the enemy have? Well, you have to just decide if the enemy team has skill shots that get blocked, and if they don't. And this could be different for melees and range, it doesn't matter, they all have different types. For instance, if you are versus a Janna, a Nami, a Lulu, they don't really have skill shots that can bully you in here, they mostly need vision of you, so you can sit in the bush and force them away, right? But say they have a Thresh with a hook, or an Ezreal ADC with his Qs, or what would be a range support with stuff that could get blocked, a Morgana with her bind, alright? Well, against those champions, you usually want to try and stand behind the melees. Obviously, if they walk up and pressure you, you can pull back. But in general, you want to stand behind the melees. So let's say versus, let's say the enemy team has an ADC there. Let's just remember the ADC is always there, actually, because it'll be easier for me to move around. So the enemy ADC is right here, right? And they have a support. So their support, let me get back in. Their support is a Thresh. So the Thresh is standing here. He is not much of a threat. I can attack him through the wave as a range support. It doesn't matter. Obviously, I'm Neeko, but if you were Nami, you could do the same thing. But if you walk over here, the Thresh can hook you. If you walk over here, you know what the Thresh is going to do? The Thresh is going to move into this bush. And then the Thresh can throw a blind hook on you. So you have to move away. And then the Thresh is going to usually walk into this bush, right? And when he walks into this bush, you're going to walk over here. Usually against champions, you can block skill shots and they take over the bush. You're just going to be standing on the opposite side and pressuring their ADC. And basically it becomes this game where if the enemy support goes over here, you go on this side of the wave, right? If he tries to move over here, you go over here. If he tries to go in here, you go over here. Literally, if he goes behind your bush there, you go over here and attack their ADC on this side of the menu so he can't hit you. It sounds really simple, but it's hard when the enemy support is moving around. There's one more state against an enemy support that I didn't discuss, is if their support tries to walk at you in the wave. Usually you just walk backwards to the casters and just kite him and attack him in the wave, and he's just going to lose the fight because he can't hit you. So that was what you would do as a range support versus a melee support or a support with skill shots. Playing a range versus range is usually a lot simpler. Against range versus range, it's usually a good idea to try and get wards in the bushes. If you can ward the enemy's bush, it's pretty good. Because basically, if I go in this bush, and their support tries to go anywhere, right? Well, I can just zone. I can hit the ADC, I can hit the support. So I'm going to force them to then move backwards. Whoopsies. I'm going to be forcing them by being in the bush to move backwards, and now they're going to be over there, and I can move up into this bush and continue to zone them farther and farther. So against champions who can't get you out of the bush, it's usually pretty easy. Legit, versus champions who can't get you out of the bush, you literally just AFK in the bush and wait until they overextend and find a pick. If they don't overextend, you just keep pushing them back until they find a pick, and usually there's not much they can do unless they get a gank. So yeah, range versus range, it's usually just the battle of who can hit the other one more and who can dodge skill shots. Versus melee supports or champions who have skill shots, usually it's more playing in the wave. There are obviously exceptions, like for instance, if you're playing range versus, say, a Leona, standing in the wave doesn't do anything. Leona can literally E you through the wave. So against a Leona, you're better off going in the bush, because at least now Leona's blind and it's easier for you to dodge and sidestep because she's blind. She might move into this bush, which is saying it's good to ward it. Always when you're standing in the bush, try to ward the other bush, or in general, try to ward it. Hopefully your ADC will be warding river. But yeah, that's how you would generally play a ranged support versus melee support. And now hopefully you guys will see how to play melee supports. Okay, so now, even though it's not my expertise, I will show you how to play melee supports versus range and melee support versus melee. So I'm going to start off with melee support versus range, since I play range versus melee, so I can give you a bit better insight on it. So say this is the enemy's range support, and say I'm playing a support like, for instance, Thresh, who cannot go through the wave. What you literally want to be doing is you want to be standing max range from their support so they can't hit you, and you'd want to just keep moving from over here to over here. It doesn't matter. It's like I said, as you're moving, you're forcing the enemy support to have to keep moving, right? The support has to go there. And then if you walk this way, you're forcing the enemy support to have to walk this way, right? And as you keep moving, eventually you're hoping the enemy support will make a mistake where you can then find like an angle through the wave, right? Maybe the enemy support, then you're moving side to side and the enemy support goes here and you find yourself an angle where you can hit him, right? So basically when you're playing melee supports, for the most part, you want to keep moving and pressuring, you know? You want to go in the bush, force their support over here. It's really good, right? Because if you move in the bush as a melee support, by the way, with a hook, it puts so much pressure on the ADC. He's super scared. He can't move from over here because if he over here, he's going to die. But at the same time, your ADC might be pressuring him and he might getting really pressured. And all you have to do is eventually just walk up into this bush and he's just going to get super, super zoned if you're a ranged melee support versus range support matchup. Usually the enemy support needs to just stay away from you. So yeah, trying to get around the wave and get angles on them, right? Like if you go over here and you force the enemy support over here, right? And then you walk up here, like they're super trying to go in on your ADC, and then you can maybe find like a flash flay on Thresh and like get engaged. So my advice for playing melee support versus range support would be to keep moving from side to side around the wave and just look for cracks and angles to find your skill shots through. If you're playing Alistar, for instance, you're just moving side to side and you want to try and flash at them. Obviously, it's very hard to do positioning in general because of the fact that that every champion is different. Like a Thresh, right, like has a skill shot that can't go through the wave, but an Alistar does, and he can play more in the wave. Thresh would want to play more in the bush. But in general, the same theories apply, where you want to be standing behind the minions that can block skill shots that are going to hit you if you're versus a skill shot champ, and if you're versus one that's not, you want to go here. So for instance, if you were playing a melee support versus neeko, who can root you through the wave, you probably don't want to play in the wave as Thresh. You probably want to go to the bush because neeko doesn't get an advantage on you here. But say you're playing Thresh and you're playing versus, what's a support that can't get through the wave? Say you're playing versus a Morgana. Say you're playing versus a Lux who can only hit through 2 melee minions and you can stand here. Against those champions, it's okay to play in the wave. But against champions who can hit you through the wave, you want to go to the side. So finally, playing tank, melee support versus melee support. These are usually a fiesta. Melee support versus melee support, you never ever want to go in on each other. So you're usually both trying to force the enemy ADC into a bad position where you can go in, right? Like again, if I'm going here and force their ADC this way, maybe my ADC can hit them, but then their support will be moving in on mine, and we're going to be both going on each other's support ADC. In general, if you go on each other's support for support, you're not going to win because the ADCs are squishier, obviously. Usually, if you have a minion wave that's bigger, you want to fight, and if you have a minion wave that's smaller, you don't. Obviously, it sounds really obvious when I say it, but like that's really, like, when it comes to melee versus melee support, it really comes down to the smallest things, because you can't add damage. All you can do is set up your ADC. So if you can get more minions to help you win the fight, then it's good to take. And if they have more minions, you want to play a bit more safe. Yeah, sorry I can't give you guys as much insight for melees versus supports, because obviously I'm a range support main and I'm more comfortable on the role, but hopefully this info helped you guys a bit. And let me know what you guys want for next week's guide. And I appreciate these how to support guides have been doing pretty well, to be honest, better than I expected them to do. And I'm glad about that because I like sharing knowledge and trying to improve everyone's experience. So yeah, if you don't mind, like, commenting, subscribing, sharing it, I would appreciate that. And I'll see you guys next week.